Hi, you are listening to This Is Not Your Practice Life. I'm your host, Macy Renee, and we are going on a journey together, my friends. I'm a certified life and emotional intelligence coach. And if you really want to step into your highest self, there are a few non-negotiables you're going to have to learn, and I am just the person to help you do it. No matter your past, I'm here to help you create a more fulfilling future. So stick around with me. Not only will I teach you how to navigate your brain's daily mind drama, but I'll help you actually understand your mind, your emotions, why you do the things you do, and why others do the things they do. Most importantly, I'll help you build the self-awareness skills to create whatever results you want. It's never too late to change the trajectory of your life. After all, this is not your practice life. Good morning, my beautiful friends. Welcome back to another episode of This Is Not Your Practice Life podcast. I'm so excited you're joining me from wherever you're listening from. Welcome back if you come all the time, and welcome if this is your first time here. All right, you guys, I have a juicy episode today. I think this one is really going to help you out in terms of where you are at in your journey. And the title of this episode is Internalizing versus Processing versus Healing. We're going to talk about these three things, and we're going to talk about some of the characteristics in being in each one of them. That way, hopefully you can figure out with whatever it is that you're navigating, you can figure out where you are in your own process and maybe some of the support you may or may not need in order to navigate the process, okay? So, of course, everything that I list is not all inclusive. There will be things that I end up, I'm sure, leaving out, examples that I'll think of later after this episode's recorded. But I do want to try and be as clear and concise and have it be as meaty as possible to really help you understand this, okay? So, internalizing versus processing versus healing. So here's the deal. Let's talk about internalizing. What does this look like when we are in the stage of internalizing? A lot of times when you are in a state of internalizing the things that are going on in your life or the things that you're navigating in your life, there's this sense of it's all in the mind. Your mind may race a lot. You may feel a lot of emotions kind of in your body. And because you're not super certain on what emotions are what, it may feel like a constant state of anxiety. This is especially true if you're not communicating a lot of the things that are in your brain or in your head or the things you're experiencing. So for instance, let's say you're going through a really hard time in your life. Internalizing will look like, for many, withholding information, not letting a lot of people in, feeling a lot of feelings. And really the big thing with internalizing is not necessarily wanting to look at it, not necessarily wanting to talk about it. It may be this inner battle or internal battle within you of, I should talk to someone about this, i.e., a therapist or a coach or, a friend or a family member. But also having this piece of your mind, body, spirit that just feels like it's dragging the feet in the mud, right? Or dragging your feet through sand. And it doesn't necessarily want to open up that can of worms, because here's the thing with internalizing. A lot of times we fear that if we open up that can of worms, it is going to be so messy, so painful. It's going to be a lot to unpack. And what our brain is so clever at knowing ahead of time is, we probably shouldn't, because that means there's going to be work, right? Work ahead of us, work we're going to have to do, or more importantly, decisions ahead of us that we do not want to face or make. There's going to be painful emotions that we foresee and that we know we're going to inadvertently experience, and we don't really want that. So instead, what we get a lot of times, if this is kind of what we're playing in, so to speak, is we have this internalization where it's like, I'm just going to withhold this for as long as I possibly can, internalize this for as long as I possibly can without talking about it, without feeling the feelings, without letting myself go there, because right now it feels like maybe the only way I can survive. Okay. Now, the side effect of this, a lot of times, in addition to just anxiety, is that it starts to wear down your body. It will start to make you feel sometimes sick, nauseous, extra fatigued, tired, hard to get out of bed. It'll mimic, because we're not going to talk like a full diagnosis, but it'll mimic a lot of those depressive kind of signs, a lot of those anxious kinds of signs that we get. And it all comes down to, our system, our body system, nervous system, all the things. It's very clever and it's very smart, and it knows that there are things that need to be addressed that we're not necessarily ready to address, right? The brain will be like, yeah, we should probably talk about XYZ and work through this. But again, if we do that, we're going to feel XYZ. We're going to feel pain. We're going to feel discomfort. We're going to feel all of these things that I don't know that we're equipped to feel. So let's internalize it. And we internalize it to the point of, I don't even know who I am anymore, or I feel like I'm drowning. I feel like I can't even think of what it is that I need. I feel lonely. I feel isolated. I feel lost. I feel disconnected. I don't know myself anymore. I don't know what I want in life. And so if you're in this stage, like if this is resonating with you right now and you're like, gosh, I do a lot of times feel anxious, or I do get into these modes where I feel just physically not like myself, or I do feel like I'm carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders. I do feel like I might have a mental breakdown. I do feel like I'm walking on a thin line of string that's bound to just snap or break at any given time. I feel overwhelmed. I feel disconnected. Like if this is your narrative, if this is what you're saying to yourself, even internally, not even out loud, but just internally, it's a good sign that you are internalizing a lot of the things that are happening in your life, a lot of the emotions that your body is trying to make you aware of, a lot of the thoughts that are circulating in your brain, whether you're conscious of them or not. If this is how you're feeling, you're in the stage with whatever circumstances are happening, or circumstance, if there's one specific life thing that's bothering you, if you feel any of the things I just mentioned, you're probably internalizing it all rather than the next step we're going to talk about, processing. Okay. So let's talk about what processing looks like and what it feels like. So processing is the next step from internalizing, or just a step that is more natural for us when we have the emotional awareness or we have the emotional intelligence to recognize when something's bothering us, and instead of shoving it down, instead of putting it in our metaphorical locker, if you all have taken my free Cope Better training, it is the act of feeling the feels. It's the act of getting really clear on what's happening in your mind, what thoughts are you having about multiple circumstances or things that are bothering you, what feelings are coming up as well, and what are you doing about it? So are you talking it out? Are you speaking with a professional like a therapist? Are you talking to a coach? Are you getting, the support that you need in your life? Are you actually processing what's going on? And the big thing about processing too, there's two things. One is it's probably going to feel yucky before it feels good. Okay. That's usually what happens when you're in the processing stage of whatever it is that you're navigating. It usually feels pretty yucky and messy and icky and just blah. Okay. I like to call it, with my clients, I call it the messy middle. I remember years and years ago, I had a client, and I think I've shared this on the podcast. I still use her example because it was just perfect. She was working through some different things, and she told me I feel like before we started coaching together that I was in the swimming pool. And in this swimming pool, I saw all the muck and the gross stuff that collects in the center of the pool because of like the filter, right? And it's fine, right? I get in the water and it's fine. It doesn't touch me. It just all stays in the center just based on the current. She goes, and then we start coaching and we start digging stuff up and we start processing all these emotions and thinking, figuring out what thoughts we're thinking. And she goes, and that feels like the equivalent of having done whirlpools, like making a whirlpool in the swimming pool. And she goes, and in that process of like doing laps around the pool over and over and over again, that dirt, that icky, yucky stuff that you don't want to touch is now all in the pool. It's all over the place. And if it were mud, it's stirred up so much that now instead of the water being clear, it's like mucky and yucky and dirty. And it's just like I'm in it. I'm swimming in it. And I just want it to be clear again. I just want the pool to be clear. And it's not clear. I'm in the mud and it's like I can't get out of the mud. This is a perfect example. Like I laughed so hard when she shared this and I said, I think I even told her I'm probably going to use that example for life. And I have been using it for a good 5 years. And I feel like it's so like it depicts perfectly what the processing stage looks like when we have opened that can of worms that we were so afraid to open in the internalizing stage. And it's messy before it's pretty because it's a lot of the emotions and thoughts we have needed to face all along to get on the other side. But it doesn't feel good because you are shedding a version oftentimes of who you've been and figuring out who you are without all of the things that have been weighing you down. And a lot of times that creates this feeling of heaviness and also this feeling sometimes of grief of leaving behind what once felt so familiar, even if it felt horrible and uncomfortable. Okay, so like an example of this would be if you were in, let's say you were in a really hard, maybe like mentally, verbally, or physically abusive relationship, romantic relationship, and it hasn't felt good. And so you're internalizing all this stuff. You're internalizing like, what do I really feel? Or what do I really think? Or should I accept this? Or is it me? Or, all of this stuff. And when you move on to the processing stage, it's letting those thoughts leave the throat, right? Like letting those thoughts that were once in your brain come out into words, being said out loud. And sometimes, like I have found even for my clients, when they're processing things like this, the act of it coming out of their mouth can feel so vulnerable and gross. Okay. It's like, oh my God, I can't believe I said that out loud. Oh my God, I can't believe I'm letting you see me. Or, oh my God, I can't believe I'm letting a group see me if they're in a group program, right? It's kind of like you've internalized what has been occurring in your mind or in your real life experience every single day for so long that when you finally say it, it doesn't always feel good right in the moment to say it. But you have to say it, right? Or expel it a lot of times in order to get it out and see it. It's kind of like, think of it as, once you spit the words out, think of them as going onto like a chalkboard or a whiteboard. And once you see it all in front of you, then you're able to actually understand it. You're able to actually understand what's been going on, why you've been feeling the way you've been feeling, and what you're feeling now. And you're able to kind of get the full picture. But to spit it out feels so painful because not only are you seeing it all out on a board, but whoever you've invited in, whether that's a therapist or a coach, or you're in a group program, or it's a friend or a family member, or someone you really trust, when it's on the board, everybody can see it. And when everybody can see it, it feels gross. It's like, I don't want you to read this board. This does not feel good to me. And I'm still moving the puzzle pieces along. I'm still trying to figure out what this piece on the left means. And I'm still trying to figure out what this piece I said on the right means. And I'm still trying to figure out like what emotions are attached to it, what thoughts I'm thinking, what I'm feeling, what I'm going to do next. Like, I don't know. Like, this board is so messy. I don't know if any of you all watch the show on Netflix, Manifest, and you know how they're putting all the people's pictures up on like that cork board and circling it and, you know, attaching strings and like finding connections. I like to think of processing our stuff kind of like that. Every time you say something out loud, every time you speak something and it like flies out of your out of your vocal cords and out of your mouth, it gets posted on that board. And at first it just might not make sense. It just feels like, oh my gosh, there it is. I've been holding that in forever. I don't know what that is yet. I don't know what to do with that yet. And so processing won't always feel good. It may feel good in the sense of like, oh, relief. I'm not holding that anymore. And it was a weight on my shoulders. But oftentimes the reason people stay in the internalizing stage is because in the processing stage, to put it all out there and to try to move those puzzle pieces around and figure out what they mean and what you're going to do with them and what you're really thinking and expelling it all is the equivalent of swimming in the pool all in the mud, right? It's very much like, oh, that feels so gross. I feel exposed. I feel vulnerable. I still maybe feel confused. Just because I'm in this stage where I've now moved it out of my body doesn't mean that I have clarity or I've arrived at the result that I want for my life. And because I haven't arrived to the destination I want, which is again, like putting shock in the pool and having a clear, beautiful crystal water pool, instead it's like, I'm in the messy middle. I am in the process of doing all of the things I need to do in order to get to the clear, beautiful crystal pool, but I have to sit in this in the process. And for most of us, we don't want to sit in it, whether it's 5 minutes, 5 weeks, 5 months, or 5 years, okay? We don't want to do it. It's like we want that immediate gratification of let's wave the magic wand and suddenly feel better. And here's the thing too, the longer that you internalize and the longer you've been internalizing, the longer and the harder the processing part will feel because you've essentially buried down maybe weeks, months, for most people, years of stuff that you have to eventually address. It doesn't mean that every single piece has to be pulled out from your past, but usually what happens is if you start pulling out one piece, it pulls out another. And if you pull out that piece, it pulls out something else. And so the processing part of this is hard. And I will say it's probably why a lot of people get stuck. And let's talk about this even in terms of emotional intelligence work. It's why most of society and most of the world is walking around without that emotional intelligence, without that emotional awareness, because to process things is a very conscious, intentional decision. And not everybody is ready for the work that's required to make that conscious, intentional decision. Because a lot of times what you're consciously and intentionally deciding is that I am willing to feel like shit. Okay, I'm trying to whisper that because I know some of you listen with your kids and I'm sorry. But that's really what it is, right? It's like I am signing myself up for the hard because I innately know that on the other side of hard is something really beautiful. Or I trust that there is just such beauty on the other side of this muck and this mess. But for a lot of people in the world, right, especially people who've maybe never looked up a personal development podcast, which you do not fall in that category. If you're listening to this episode, you probably at some point have felt the invitation to go from internalizing to processing. And maybe you're even in a place where you're like, oh yeah, I've processed some stuff and it felt like absolute hell. And it's really hard. And you might be in a place where you're like, it was so hard. I feel like sometimes I can't continue on, or I can't do it, right? It's a very hard, intentional, conscious decision. And for most people, they're not even willing to do that. We're walking around, most humans, internalizing everything that we feel, just internalizing it, not processing it, internalizing it. And so I want you to think about this too, as you're processing things and you're around people in your life that are just internalizing things. That's where sometimes even disconnects happen in relationships. You got someone that is doing the mucky, messy work and surrounded by people who are not willing to face that work. And it doesn't mean that we can't be around them. It doesn't mean that they can't be in our life, or we can't be friends, or we can't have a great relationship. But it does create a little bit of tension, because that processing stage is so intentional, and there's a lot of healing that will take place. And as you process over time, a lot of times what that does is free up so much emotional space. It frees up your mind, over time. It allows room for different things to come into your life that weren't available to you before. So it opens up and cracks open essentially this whole entire new world. And even that can feel scary for us, right? When we're like, oh my gosh, what is this? What are all these new opportunities coming to me? What are all these new people that are entering my life? What is all of this? And sometimes that will even bring up more to process, because we have to feel worthy of it. We have to feel confident. We have to meet even new levels of ourselves. So if you're in the process of processing, kudos to you. I know how difficult this is. And oftentimes you're going to do this in different stages. You're going to do this with different things in your life, and it's just challenging. But you will kind of know when you're ready to be done with internalizing, and when you're ready to step into processing. And when you're ready to step into processing, that's oftentimes when you're seeking out help. You're like, okay, I've done enough of this on my own. I've tried to do the best that I can. I've gotten myself to, a certain level, and I don't feel like I can go further. I feel like things are maybe heavy, or they're stalling, or I was making progress and now I'm not making progress. And so now it's time to process deeper. And then that's when that next stage happens. Okay. Now, the next stage from here is the healing stage. Let's talk about what the healing stage will often look and feel like. Oftentimes, how you know that you have healed things that were once a pain point for you is when you've actually done processing work, and the things that once got you really emotionally activated or even triggered do not hold that much weight and emotion anymore. So it's kind of like, that you've really processed something and moved into the healing stage when you can look back at a way that you would have reacted to something, or a person that once was really bothersome in your life, or, just things that you experienced in your past, and they no longer hold the same amount of power over you. You don't find yourself getting super frazzled, or emotionally worked up, or frustrated, or shutting down. You won't have those same reactions. So there's a lot of things that, like, when I met my coach 8 years ago, there were a lot of pain points for me. And a part of why I felt so internally heavy and lost, even at 24 years old, I just felt like, oh my gosh, I've talked about this in the podcast, but the way I described this to my life coach on my consult was, I don't know up from down, left from right. I don't know anything. I feel like I can't even formulate a sentence. And what I meant by that when I was telling her that on the phone was, I have internalized everything that I've experienced my entire life, with family, friends, anything that I've experienced in my life, traumatic, whatever. I have held it in, and I haven't actually learned how to process. And so here's what's interesting. I started therapy when I was 6, and I did therapy pretty darn consistently for 17 years. Okay. I had counselors, I had psychologists, I had psychiatrists. I spoke to people about everything happening in my life. So you would think that by doing that I was in the processing stage. But really, what I was doing was talking about things out loud to feel better for a temporary amount of time, like even if it was a week, and then go back to internalizing how horrible I was feeling. And it was because at that time, I didn't have the tools to know I was in charge of really how I thought and how powerful my mind was. And I didn't understand emotions. I didn't have emotional intelligence. I didn't have awareness. I didn't have emotional resilience. And with that, I was talking about all of my problems and I would feel better right after a therapy session. But as soon as the triggers, AKA the people that bothered me or that hurt me, would come back into my life, whatever they would say, whatever they would do, all of it would come rushing back and I was actually triggered all over again. And so it was kind of like I was surviving, like I would go to therapy and I'd feel better. And then it was like what I was actually doing was surviving until my next session. So if I would see someone, let's say I went to therapy on a Monday, if I would see someone that triggered me on a Thursday, I did not know how to feel or process or do anything with that other than I've got to get back to therapy on Monday. I wish my therapy was Friday, right? So something happened to me Thursday. I really need to be at the therapist's office Friday, but she's not available till Monday. And so I just have to survive until then. So it was this internalization of not really knowing how to move myself through. When I met my coach, that's when I learned a lot more about emotions and my mindset and what I actually had control of and what I didn't. And that's when I started talking about all of my stuff and all of my experiences, just like I had in therapy. But rather than just talk about it and move forward, my coach would pull out the pieces of like, wait, did you hear what you just said? And do you see how this is affecting you? And do you see what you have control over? And do you see what you don't have control over? And do you know what I mean? So like there was more exploration for me to process all of my emotions. And also, I think when the student is ready, the teacher appears. So it's like, even if my therapist did some form of this, which honestly, I don't believe that they did, but even if they did at the time, I obviously wasn't in the mental headspace to be ready for it the way that I was at 24 years old when I met my coach. And so I did a lot of processing for the next several years in coaching, like pulling out all the things that had bothered me my entire life, rather than withholding them. And rather than just saying them to say them, I would say them with the intention, the very clear intention of, I'm saying this out loud to you because I want you to see what I don't see so that I can heal this, because I don't want to carry this anymore. I don't want to internalize this anymore. I just don't want this. So please help me process it, right? And what all of that processing did with different situations and scenarios and people is that now you can put me in a room with those people. You can have a very uncomfortable topic come up around these people or something that would have bothered me in the past. And you can also ask me any part of my history with these people. And I do not get flustered. I don't often cry or become an absolute mess. I don't have the same emotional, what's the word I'm looking for? Like the same emotional reaction or intensity with it. And it's not because I've numbed it out or I'm internalizing. It's because I've literally done so much processing work around certain people and situations and circumstances that once bothered me that now it doesn't carry the same power. And so even with healing, when someone says, how do I know if I've really healed something? A lot of times there's not really a hesitation to talk about the thing, right? There's not, when you're asked a question, it won't feel like, oh my God, I've got to be vulnerable again. This is totally going to suck. Instead, it's like, you will be able to say it out loud or share the experience a lot of times, and it'll just feel like you're stating something out of the news, right? It'll feel very factual. It won't feel like it has the same emotional weight. And how to know if maybe you've processed something a good amount, but you still have some pieces to heal is if you do bring something up and you found that over the course of several months you haven't cried over it, but there's maybe this little twinge of emotion that you feel or a tear that wants to come out, then that tells you that there's maybe like a little side pathway that you are being invited to that you can process and actually heal. So the big difference with how do I know if I'm healing it versus if I've just kind of buried it so deep I'm emotionless and I don't care. I think whenever someone states something that has happened in their life and they're emotionless, there's one of two things that have happened. There's either I haven't even dug that up, I've internalized it, and I've buried it so deep that I'm emotionless to it. Like I don't feel anything because I've never allowed myself to feel the emotions because feeling the emotions is scary. There's like that level of detachment and emotionlessness of, I've never let myself even go there. And I know it every time I say it, it sounds horrible, but like I'm fine because, it is what it is. Like sometimes there's that mentality that people have, which tells me oftentimes, okay, they've internalized, they've buried, they haven't actually processed. And then on the flip side, if someone is a little bit more emotionless with, something that they've experienced in their life, it could also be that they have talked about it so much, they've processed it so much, they've felt all the feelings, they've forgiven if they've needed to forgive, they've, they understand themselves more, they understand and feel compassion for maybe the other person in their life when the processing part has happened. And someone is actually coming from a healed place, they might not show emotion with things that feel like maybe they should, but it's because they've processed it. They really have dug in there and, cleaned out the wound, so to speak. There's no infection left, if that makes sense. So I hope that this helps you kind of understand the difference between internalizing versus processing versus healing, and helps you even see maybe where are you with different things in your life. Are there certain areas in your life where you're like, I know I'm internalizing and I don't want to look at it and I don't want to talk about it and I don't want to touch it? And are there areas in your life where you're like, oh yeah, I'm actively processing. It feels like absolute hell. I don't like it. I do feel good sometimes because I know that I'm healing, but at the same time, it also feels like trash because I want it to go faster. And then there may be also areas in your life where like, yep, I'm healing like if you would have put me in that same situation a year ago at work or a year ago with my partner or a year ago with my mom or a year ago with my dad, I would have lost my crap. I would have yelled, I would have screamed, I would have XYZ. And if you can recognize I don't even get bothered like that anymore, it's not even a problem for me anymore, then that tells you areas where you've healed. So I hope this kind of helps you see where you're at. And what I want to encourage you to do is that if you're in that internalizing stage and if you're done with it, if you're like, you know what, I'm ready to stop internalizing, I'm ready to stop doing everything by myself, I'm ready to stop, thinking I have to do this alone or, bury this, hide this, not speak about it, be secretive, just to feel like I'm surviving, just to feel like, I'm making it. But internally, I feel like I'm not. I feel like I can't keep going this way. That's when you schedule a consult call, when you're done with that. I recognize that there's going to be people that listen to this and they know they're internalizing, but they're not ready to be done with it. And what I want to encourage you to do is just recognize that. And when you get to the place where you're done with that, ask yourself how you want to go about processing. That could be the route of therapy. That could be the route of coaching. Either way, when you're ready for that, make that call, right? Really reach out, find your person. If you don't find your person the first time, keep looking until you find the person you feel safe with and that you feel comfortable with, okay? Don't give up on yourself in going from internalizing to processing. And as you're processing, be gentle with yourself, be compassionate with yourself, Because it's going to feel like ass, okay? It's probably going to feel bad before it feels good. There's going to be little twinges of where it feels good because you're like, oh my gosh, I'm growing, I'm doing the thing, I'm meeting like-minded people, or I feel seen, I feel understood. There's going to be those great moments. But in between those great moments are also going to be like, oh my God, it's so hard. I don't want to show up. Like, I don't want to show up to therapy, or I don't want to show up to my coaching call, or I don't want to do this. It feels so hard. I need a break. I don't like it. I don't want to look at this. I don't want to talk about this. I don't want to feel this, right? And that's normal. That's normal when you're in the processing stage. It's like, oh, I can't believe I initiated doing this work. This work feels awful. Right? It feels great and awful all at the same time. Okay. And then when you're healing, you will know, because things that once would have really rocked your world are not going to rock it the same way. Right? You might still feel emotion because we're humans. We're always going to have emotions. I'm just going to repeat that. You're human. You will always, always, always have emotion and feel emotion. The goal of coaching, the goal of therapy, if you're a therapy person, the goal of emotional intelligence coaching, which is exactly what I do with my clients, is not to get you to a place where you don't feel terrible emotions. You're human. You're always going to feel crappy emotions. What I help people do is process and understand those emotions so that your emotions aren't negatively running your life and creating results you do not want. I want you to build the resilience and the compassion for yourself and the grace for yourself to allow yourself to feel every emotion on the spectrum, okay, from happy and joyful and elated to totally down in the dumps, crappy, yucky, icky, funky, sad, all the things, right? Anxious. I want you to be able to feel that and not feel also like your world is falling apart, or like it's too much to handle, or that you can't even think about being a citizen on this planet because your emotions feel too bad. I want to help equip you with the tools and the knowledge and the skills and the awareness and all of the self-love and the confidence and everything in between to feel like, you know what, life gets to be pretty damn good. And I get to be the creator of a pretty damn good life. And you know what? I don't have to be fearful of my emotions. I don't have to run away. I don't have to internalize. I don't have to people please. I don't have to live a life less than what I desire. And when you get to that place and you're done with the internalizing, that's when you make the call. That's when it's time to schedule a consult, okay? And I will help you. I will help you even if that means that I am not your person and I need to help you find someone that is your person. I will do that because life is way too short to be stuck in the internalizing phase, okay? This is not your practice life. So if you're done with the internalizing, you're really truly done, reach out and make that call for yourself, okay? Because there's really great things waiting for you on the other side. It's not going to feel easy. It's not going to feel like a bed of roses all the time. Some days it will be. Some days you're going to get off the calls and you're going to feel so excited and you're going to be so proud of your work and you're going to be like, oh my God, I'm having the best weeks ever. I'm probably not going to have anything to coach on next week. And then sometimes you'll get to the call next week and you're going to be like, everything in my life is falling apart. What's happening? I thought I was doing so good. And I just want to tell you, you're doing amazing. If that happens, nothing has gone wrong. You're living the human experience. What I want to help you do is just become more equipped to live that human experience and not feel like all these external circumstances are running or ruining your life. Okay? This is not your practice life, and you've got this. And if you don't feel like you've got it, I've got your back until you feel like you've got it, okay? And even if you've had support before and you got out for the support and you felt like you were doing pretty good, and now you're noticing, I need it again. I'm not feeling good again, but it's for a totally different thing, or it's something I thought I was done with, but now it's coming up again and it's coming full force. No matter what it is, there's no judgment, okay? I'm here to help no matter what that means and how you need it. Just make sure that when you're done with that internalizing stage, that you reach out for the help to get what you deserve. Okay? All right. I love you. Have a great week. And if you need anything, schedule the consult. Bye, guys. Hey there. Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of This Is Not Your Practice Life podcast. If you'd like to connect on social media, you can find me on both Instagram and Facebook at Macy Renee Coaching. And if you want to stay up to date on all of my offers, announcements, and inspirational emails, you can join my email list at macyrenee.com. In addition, if there's a way that I can further support you in your coaching journey, you can schedule a free 60-minute consult at macyrenee.com anytime you want so we can discuss the best options for you. I look forward to seeing you next week, and I hope you have an amazing day. Bye.